another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 quick match gameplay. This time around we're on Carrick Asgal playing as the Dawi against the Skaven. So for this matchup, one of the things I would highly recommend if you're a Dwarf player, and I do in this match, is bring a Rune Lord. You might be wondering why. Well, it's because Skaven, a lot of their AP options, a lot of their options for cracking Dwarf fortresses, for cracking the Dwarves in general, are reliant on a magic and missile damage, and the Rune Lord completely screws that over. You've got, if you bring him on an Anvil of Doom, which is what I would highly recommend, you get plus 15% magic resist in your entire army. That means that against any magic damage your opponent brings, you've got almost 50% resistance. Stack that on top of a cool resistance buff that you get, the Master Rune of Grungni, and you've got plus 20% missile resist, which, as you can see here, applying to these lovely lads, these longbeards, which means they are going to have a combined 60% damage resist against things like Blake-Law catapult shots. Now for the rest of this army, I decided to roll with a bunch of longbeards for the front, 4 units of them, nothing fancy there. They'll hold, they'll do okay. We're not really relying on them to kill much. Basically just hold. If my opponent goes heavy on Stormmen, we could be in a bit of trouble, but for that we have other tools to help crack those. Some miners with blasting charges to provide some support, double Slayer in the back, a single Dragon back, as well as some Giant Slayers. Triple Cannon, which perhaps a little overkill, probably should have gone with like 2, but you know, cannons are fun. Looking to counter battery my opponent, looking to shut down Doom Wheels, all that sort of stuff, bombard Rat Ogres, all that sort of stuff. They'll do very well. A Flame Cannon in the front to deal with filthy Ratlings in close quarters, and this can, I think, have a bit of a niche here. They're kind of hard to shut down for most factions, especially for Skaven, because their summons don't really reach that far. You've got 230 range on it, so it's still respectable enough to hit all Skaven troops without fear of being shot back by anything except artillery. And finally, we do have our Ulthar's Raiders here. As for what our Rune Lord brought to the table, by the way, he brought all of his runes, and that's about it. Master Rune of Negation, Wrath and Ruin, and Oath and Steel, which I find is very useful here. If your opponent goes with a Wither build, it's always good to have resistance. Now for my opponent, he did go with a pretty interesting comp, definitely very magic heavy. Double Skaven Slave Slingers on either end, just to provide a bit of support. For his Lord, a Plague Priest, who does have just the summoning spells, as well as, actually not just the summoning spells. He also did bring Blessed with Filth, which is, of course, applies poison. Queek Headtaker alongside him with all of his abilities. Queek, of course, very strong in this matchup, surprisingly. Arguably better than Skrulk. Honestly, if your opponent prepares with a Rune Lord, definitely better than Skrulk. Because he can fight Footlords and most really effectively, and even if he's fighting like a Rune Lord, he's with trophy heads, he can still melt them real quick. He's really solid. He's actually one of the better foot duelists, I think, in the game, even compared to people like Sigvald, I think. For the front line, my opponent has a bunch of clan rats who are just there to soak up blasting charges and soak up missile fire. They are backed by 3 Plague Monk Sensor Bearers, who are of course very susceptible to shooting. They're very squishy, and more importantly, they do magic damage. So although that mighty 46 weapon strength might look awful good, it's going to be cut down to like 26 when our Rune Lord's buffs come into play, or debuffs come into play. 2 Blake-Law catapults, who are also losing almost half, or perhaps more than half of their damage because of our Rune Lord, and then some Skaven Slaves in the back to provide support, and a Doom Wheel, which I think is great. Even if your opponent goes with magic resistance, its melee is obviously not magic, so it can do a lot of work. Oh, and I did almost forget to mention, but there's some Gutter Runners in the back here. Who, interesting choice, but they can definitely harass my Super Slayers and do pretty well there. So perhaps a good one. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't really used normal Gutter Runners in this matchup. I've done Slingers plus Death Runners for the armor killing mob, but maybe it works. I don't know. Definitely cool or interesting decision, and definitely not something I'd say is bad. I've had very good experience with Skinks. You can see here the Plague-Law catapult not even able to take off models, and this really shows. You can see that 60% missile combined resistance just really coming into play here, denying my opponent the damage he really wants to be getting out of his catapults. The line's definitely closing in. You can see over here the Ulthar's Raiders kind of positioned here. In retrospect, I probably would have been better off with like Bugmans, but I wanted something to quickly potentially take out something like a Tomb Wheel. You can see Rune of Wrath and Ruin does go down these Plague Monk Sensor Bears. They are still a much bigger threat than, say, these Clan Rats or any of those units. There's not much else for me to target with the Doom Wheel that far back. Unfortunately, a bit of a mistake here. I didn't realize this was Queek, and so I kind of just ignored him. I'm like, it's probably Skrulk. I thought it was Skrulk for some reason, and so like a moron, I'm wandering off with trophy heads, and I'm like, and I won't notice that I've lost so much HP until just a little while from now. In the meantime, you can see, though, that front line, these Plague Monk Sensor Bears not really leaving much of an impact. You can see the Fire Cannon now going in, the Flame Cannon just melting these Plague Monk Sensor Bears, already up to 15 kills, and in comes the damage, just melting their faces, and really doing a pretty great job here. Able to just break up this formation. Granted, those shots, you know, hitting at the tail end, unfortunately not going for center of mass, but still hitting our friendly rangers there. But with all the master runes going down, they're actually very resistant. And my opponent's playing the Sensor Bears here, forced to immediately rout. And you can see the Ultra Raiders with all those buffs really pretty resistant. Dive into these land rats, running for dear life against weak, and of course the Skaven are a lot faster than us, which is a big problem. Anytime though the Flame Cannon is going to force off those guys, I'm just going to be able to start shifting fire onto these troops over here, and you can see these Plague Monk Sensor Bears and these Clan Rats having a terrible time of it. My opponent's Catapult's trying to work on the Flame Cannon, but really just not cutting the mustard. A bit of friendly fire certainly going down, but 99 kills here. Giant Wax Slayers in the meantime is zoning off these Gutter Runners. A bit of an unfortunate sacrifice, not what you want to be doing with them, but I didn't want them shutting down my artillery, which is very important. And this whole time my cannons, they've been working. They've got this catapult down to just one gun now. This catapult's down to nothing. It's gone. And we're now going to shift fire onto these Doom Millers. We've just been chipping away at these high-value targets. You can see satchel charges there, wrecking these Plague Monks. The Flame Cannon completely uninterrupted, just destroying these guys. Now, sure, the Longbeards are suffering, but just too little, too late. These Plague Monks are going to break. And that's going to be that for my opponent. You can see the Flame Cannon up to 100 kills. Queek, though, definitely chasing, and we're running for dear life here with our Broom Lord, trying to escape. They're being pursued by a very tired Queek and an active Plague Priest, so that's pretty rough. You can see the Satchel Charge is doing some work, wrecking these Plague Monk Sensor Bears, and the Longbeards just slaying it out. They're not really getting hurt by these Clan Rats, and the Plague Monk Sensor Bears, who should counter them, even with the magic resist, there's just so much magic resist that they just don't care. And now another Lunar Vathan going down, destroying them, and the Flame Cannon shifting fire, and the barrage it's coming in hot and heavy, and just look at those explosions, those poor little rats just getting sent flying by that arcing fire. Flame Cannon up to 126 kills, Ulthar Raiders finding their axes, not an optimal choice because you don't really have targets elsewhere. And these guys are going to be forced into full rout, and if we take an overarching look at the battlefield now, my opponent's essentially screwed. His Doom Wheel here, full retreat after the cannons decided to focus on it a little bit. And it's basically just a few Skaven Slave Slingers, a handful of Plague Monk Sensor Bears trying to rally, a single Plague Claw Catapult, which sucks. It's just a terrible situation right now. These miners will just destroy these Clan Rats. There's still a lot of Longbeards, surprisingly, like 67 over there. The Flame Cannon just pounding these guys, just constant shots pouring in. Plague Priest here gets caught by the Giant Slayers and is immediately put into the ground. You can see he's just forced to flee. Though, unfortunately, the Rune Lord here just being overwhelmed by Queek, hit by trophy heads. He is not really able to escape. What I probably should have done here is threaded in between my troops here, try to bait Queek into my Dragon Slayers, or Giant Slayers, but unfortunately it doesn't happen. You can see he's actually going to drag into melee here against Queek because I lose a little bit of tracking. So yeah, that's going to be it for Mr. Rune Lord. We do get our runes off last second, but it's too little too late. We're going to rout, and Queek is going to put us into the dirt. And that is just what it is. So there goes the Rune Lord running on his chair. Dragon Slayers are coming back, having lost a huge chunk of their models and most of their HP to the Gutter Runners. Not where they wanted to be, but in the meantime, the miners, the Longbeards, they're all keeping that pressure on, pushing back these Skaven, denying them the ability to really get much done. The Flame Cannon still providing that valuable support, up to 161 kills. And that was actually pretty surprising this game. It did a lot of work. Over here, the Plague Monk Sensor Bears trying to do work, but even like, sure, miners aren't very tanky, but these guys, they're just losing so much damage because of that magic resistance. It's just really rough for them, and you can see these Plague Monk Sensor Bears as well, just not really able to get very far. They're taking cannon fire, which is just killing models and chipping them down left and right. The cannons are out of targets at this point, obviously. Over here, the Longbeard is pulling back because I figured I'm not going to catch those Skaven Slingers anyway. But at this point, my opponent's army is simply going to start falling apart. You can see over here, poor Queek does get caught out. My opponent did get a bunch of summons in on this cannon crew, far too little too late. He really needed this ages ago, and it just didn't happen. Now, although he is going to be able to take out crew offline, he's just not going to cut the mustard. The Plague Priest is in here against miners, but just too little too late. And the Flame Cannon is actually going to pivot around and start pounding these summons, trying to get them off the field, trying to force them to rout. See, up to 179 kills now. Plague Priest running for dear life. Queek actually does go down here, I do believe. You can see he's there. It is a Crimson Armor, so he's no longer the best. And at that point, my opponent's army is simply going to fall apart, and it's going to be GG for the Fdawi. So I'm sure some of you guys have been hoping for a Dwarf victory or for a Dwarf game for a while. I know I have some Dwarf fans out there. So hopefully this was it. Honestly, the double can or the triple can was a little excessive. I could have gone with just two and still had money for something else I could have invested in. I don't really know what, but just about, two more miners blasting charges could have been a game probably more valuable there than an extra cannon. The Flame Cannon did some immense work. That was something I was really impressed with. It almost got 200 kills, and a lot of those were against Plague Monks and Cerberus. They were against very valuable targets. Skaven don't have the great. They've got okay tools. With their summons, they can kind of shut down crews, but it's tough. Those summons route fairly easily. They've only got 60-meter range, and all that sort of stuff is pretty limiting. Miners, they did great. The Longbeards did good. I definitely would recommend a Rune Lord in this matchup, just because of how many of Skaven options are built around. Well, I'd say, honestly, this is why I'd say Rune Lord. It's a bit of a twofold thing. One, a lot of Skaven AP options right now rely on magic damage. Death Globes, Plague Monks, Sensor Bears, all of their artillery, to do lightning bolts. All of those are magic damage dealing units. So that in and of itself is just... Plus Skrulk, who's probably the most popular Lord pick, even in this matchup, despite the fact that Queek's pretty good here. Or Plague Furnaces, or... Screaming Bells, or all that sort of stuff. All of those do magic damage. And that makes the Rune Lord's ability incredibly useful, because Skaven don't have many non-magical AP sources of AP damage. They've got Rat Ogres, Stormmen Halberds, which I wouldn't recommend here, Death Runners, and they've got Doom Mills and Helped Abominations. But Helped Abominations, once again, not very good in this matchup. So really, they've only got 3 viable-ish AP options. And for that, the Rune Lord, he's really good against everything else. And even then, if you need to shut down mobile units, the Rune Lord can slow them down with Rune of Wrath and Ruin. If your opponent's trying to use Wither or some sort of ability like that to nuke down your armor and, say, crack you with Stormvermin or Plague Monks, you can counter that with Rune of Oath and Steel and Rune of Negation. So that just makes the Rune Lord an all-around winner in this matchup, I think. And he's just so very solid, and I would definitely recommend using him. If you're not sure what Lord to use, or if you're kind of wondering what is a really solid Lord, I think it's definitely the Rune Lord here. But yeah, he just makes the rest of the army work so much better. My opponent's magic damaging. You can see Plague Monks, Sensor Bears. Like, a lot of these guys got into the fight basically unscathed, because my artillery wasn't focused on them. Ulthar's Raiders actually focused on the Plague Priest initially. Yeah, there was nothing chipping at these guys. And 15 kills. They should be crushing these Longbeards, and it just didn't happen. So, I know the artillery, 19 kills between the two. Just weren't sure some of them weren't able to hit, but also they just weren't able to do the damage. So really pretty useful. Yeah, that's it. If I was Chief Campy, or if I was playing Skaven, I wouldn't recommend bringing this much reliance on magic damage. I'd say do a rush build. You've seen some of my other builds. I risk it sometimes with Death Globes, which I don't necessarily recommend if you want to be winning consistently. But you can do a rush build with Death Runners, Plague Monks, that sort of stuff, and I think you're better off. But regardless, that's just my 2 cents. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you found it informative and hopefully entertaining. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below to keep up with additional content. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions, anything of that nature, be sure to post them down below, and I'll do my best to respond as soon as I can. As usual, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.